Welcome to Otaku Dai-kun. Dai and Ari-chan here, and today we'll be going over some tropes and cliches, unique and prominent within anime and Japanese games. So you start watching anime, and find it super original and exciting. But as you watch more and more shows, you begin to notice some common plot elements, or the same scenarios being played out again and again. For better or worse, a great many anime recycle the same ideas, with little to no variation between them.
Now some of these we don't mind, but others are downright cringeworthy. Don't misunderstand, this isn't a tropes versus anime video at all, as I find some of these tropes quite fun. We've got a separate list for video game tropes, so you won't find those here unless there's overlap. Now, some examples of the tropes I mentioned include spoilers, so let it be known.
You have been warned.
Let's jump right on in. I'm sure you've seen it before, a guy and girl living under the same roof, at least for a time, and one of them walks in on the other while they're changing. It can be a guy minding his own business and the girl walks in and sees his junk, or a girl sees a spider in the bathroom, screams, and the guy busts into the room out of worry only to witness some TNA. 9 times out of 10, regardless of the circumstances or who's at fault, the girl's gonna get embarrassed and smack the shit out of the guy. It's meant to be a playful slapstick, as even the most gentle of men are ridiculed as perverts, or that a smack or two is worth the price of some bishoujo flesh. The fundamental bone to pick here is that the guys are treated as punching bags, and getting smacked around is hardly ever seen as abusive. It's not the end of the world, but certainly a pet peeve. I actually gain a lot of respect for shows that subvert this trope, and I watch carefully to see what happens to the guy as a result of the accident. Saber from Fate Stay Night and Amane from Fruit of Grisaya are examples of the trope being subverted and the guy not getting clobbered.
On the topic of exposure, there are beloved hot spring scenes that you can find in almost every anime. The events that transpire in these springs are all familiar, such as having the girls talk about and grope each other's breasts, and everyone playing ping pong and yukata after bathing. Yet none are more generic than the men's mission to peep on the girls as they bathe. The common attempts involve drilling a hole in the wall between gendered baths, but climbing the wall is also very common. The guys also get aroused hearing the girls touch each other, and there's usually one character, often the protagonist, who refuses to partake in the mission due to their moral high ground. Either way, the men never get away unscathed, and often don't get the eye candy they were aiming for. The most entertaining Hot Springs mission has got to be from Fullmetal Panic Fumofu, as the men have to overcome landmines and automatic sentry guns to succeed.
If your anime cast isn't bathing, it's swimming. Most anime, especially harems, involve a scene or episode where the characters visit a beach or local pool. The contents of these episodes tend to vary, but will almost always involve a swimsuit walk-on from the girls. The boys in the group finish changing early and get to watch, one by one, as the girls reveal their bodies and choice of swimsuits for the boys to judge. These lineups often include one girl who only brought along their generic school swimsuit, much to the disappointment of the boys. You might also see the watermelon breaking game, or a girl losing her bikini top in the water, but those are less consistent.
When an anime character catches a glimpse of someone sexy, you'd expect them to bust a nut. Not so in anime. Rather, they bust a blood vessel and get a nosebleed in place of a hard-on. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know for sure why this is, but I'm guessing it has to do with superstition or a studio not wanting to dry a guy pitching a tent.
Spoiler territory. This trope deals with dead characters, so steer clear if that's important to you. Fridging a character is a phrase that implies a character is killed off in order to advance the narrative for other characters. Most commonly, it's a hero's love interest getting murdered or sacrificed in order to motivate them to take action or to grow stronger. It's often a negative term, as it seems to treat characters like tools for narrative development rather than as people. Some of that I find to be overly exaggerated, but it's hard to deny the number of women in anime who are killed off to enhance the tragedy of a story. Most of the time, the woman in question is fatally ill, and is destined to die from their illness. These women aren't dying heroic deaths, but are instead killed off by writers to invoke harsh tragedy. It's not like this doesn't ever happen to men, but they are the minority when it comes to whose death will be the most unfair.
That last trope was kind of intense. Let's cool down with a more quirky one. If you watch a lot of anime featuring Japanese school life, chances are you've noticed this one subconsciously. Like, 9 times out of 10, the main character will always be seated one desk forward from the back, along the window-facing wall. Light Yagami, Tomoya, Kyon, Takumi, they all sit in the same seat in class. This lets them space out, notice things through the window, and get pestered by the person behind them. It's also convenient for artists because they have fewer characters to draw in frame.
So, your anime protagonist is busy saving the world or whatever, but they still go to school in the meantime. Your hero could be acquainted with a rival, arch-nemesis, international visitor, or alien, and it won't matter. Sooner or later, your protagonist is going to be shocked at the sight of that acquaintance transferring into their class, regardless of age, nationality, or credentials. It's a way for an anime series to tell you a new character is in for the long haul. The transfer student almost always has an agenda that requires them being ever closer to the protagonist, and is able to forge their documentation or pay their way into school to do it.
I've seen more of these than I've ever wanted to in anime. If your characters are in high school, chances are there's going to be one of these at some point in the series. Most often, the protagonist class will decide to refit their classroom into a haunted house or cafe for the event. If the cast is a bit more obscure, they'll make a campy student film, put on a play, or perform a live concert. It's been attacked at every angle, and I doubt I'll ever see a cultural festival in anime that presents something I haven't seen. Perhaps the most original one I've seen came from Pet Girl of Sakuraso, where the main character and his dorm mates make an interactive game that requires cheering from the audience.
Alright, that's enough school-specific tropes for now. Instead, imagine this. A boy and girl, for whatever reason, wind up falling atop each other. Regardless of who breaks the other's fall, one of the boy's hands inevitably winds up pressed into one of the girl's breasts. Instinctively, trying to understand what he's feeling, the boy proceeds to squeeze the girl's boob until she takes notice and pushes away. You'll see this scenario everywhere. It's ridiculous when the boy is so dense that he really can't tell what he's touching until it's too late.
You've got a character who's freaking out, acting hysterical, or says something completely out of line. How do you stop him? The bitch slap. Nobody's safe from it, whether it's a guy or a girl. I honestly don't have much to say. I'll just show you.
Japan's got a declining birth rate, and this trope's not helping. A majority of anime romances are extremely timid and slow-moving, to the point where it can take an entire season for two lovers to confess to one another, and an entire show to finally kiss. Anyone who's had a long-running relationship would know there's a lot more work to be done after kissing, and many challenges to overcome, none of which are usually addressed in romance anime. It's like they jump from kissing to having a successful family without anything in between.
I'm exaggerating on this one a bit, actually. It's whenever a couple is on the verge of a kiss, and someone or something interrupts them. This isn't unique to anime, but coupled with the previous trope, this can be frustrating.
This one's a fairly new trope, but I see it emerging quite rapidly. There's nothing wrong with a girl or a group of girls getting really aroused and excited by yaoi or boys love. It's only fair for all the fan service flying around. However, some anime go to absurd lengths to force fujoshi culture into their stories. The worst offenders are Utawareru mono Itsubari no Kamen and Collide Liner Prisma Ilia. In both, an entire episode is devoted to the female characters discovering doujinshi and coming to terms with their newfound obsession. The problem is, especially in Utawareru mono's case, that doujinshi is so culturally specific that it has nothing to do with the story's fantasy setting or major themes.
I actually stopped watching Prisma Ilia over this, as the show just said fuck it to the action, drama, class cards, and magic to go goof off on 10-year-olds getting into smutty comics.
A tasteful inclusion of this trope does exist in the anime Gate, however, when foreign ambassadors are so fascinated by the doujinshi found during their visit to Japan that they glorify it as valuable artistic export.
This trope covers all the unnecessary chit-chat that goes on during important action scenes in anime. Initial D is formulated on this, as nearly every single hairpin turn is coupled with a spectator's monologue or conversation about the race and what's happening. By the end of the race, you'll know what every single person thought of every single point along the way. A lot of Shonen Jump series revel in characters explaining their special attacks before, during, and after their use. It can get a bit silly, like children bickering over their superpowers.
I am Burag, and I have lots and lots of powers. No, asshole!
It's not like discussing strategies and abilities is wrong, but doing so in the heart of battle just seems so pointless. I'm totally fine with characters saying the name of their attacks to perform them, though. It's a lot like kendo etiquette. One of my friends pointed out just how unrealistic this scene is from Clannad After Story. It doesn't feel like an organic fight, but rather a stage performance. I know some who hate this term, but I'll use it nonetheless because it's a popularized term. A trap is a character who looks like the opposite sex they're assumed to be, most commonly a feminine boy, being mistaken for a girl. These characters almost always struggle with managing their gender identity, wishing they had been born the other sex. Their predicament is often comedic, such as Luca from Steins Gate. The characters who know him will always jokingly remind you that he's a dude and not a chick. This isn't to say that these characters are disrespected, but the androgyny is just so strong, and it's easy to misidentify the character's sex. Genshiken's second season and Wandering Sun handle this trope quite tastefully.
These days, you probably won't be surprised to know how much some Japanese love lolicon characters. You know, young prepubescent girls. One criticism tossed their way is that the girls aren't old or mature enough mentally for the perverse situations they're put into. Enter the ancient lolly, a little girl whose body doesn't age, allowing her to be much older and more mature than she appears. Elia from Fate Stay Night is actually 10 years older than she looks. Evangeline from Negima and Shinobu from the Monogatari series are both vampires whose bodies seem to age very slowly, by like hundreds of years or something crazy like that. Edna from Tales of Zestiria is also quite old, despite her appearance. Sometimes these characters really do act more mature, but oftentimes the age is completely arbitrary, since they behave just like any other lolly.
Some anime thrive off of the same running gags and general status quo that, if they made their characters change too dramatically, they would no longer be able to keep up the same gimmicks. This is sometimes a good thing, as it allows for a show to be very accessible at any point in. Cowboy Bebop is great this way, as most of its episodes don't require prior knowledge of what came before. Pokemon lives and breathes on maintaining a general status quo, as does Slayers. How can such a show end then? With a status quo ending. A status quo ending is mostly used to wipe the narrative slate clean between seasons. Slayers Next does this, where Lena and Gowry finally find love and kiss one another in a touching embrace, only to have their memories wiped so they can keep their argumentative character dynamics, not making any genuine progress.
So, those were some tropes that we happen to see all the time when watching anime. If you can name more examples of these, or subversions thereof, please list them below. It's a rather fun topic, so I hope you enjoyed. If so, please feel free to subscribe to our channel for more otaku topics. Until then, celebrate your fandom!